guys, minus one who's behind the scenes lurking. It's just me and Dee today. We're going over the last of the Worlds of Cypher books that this is the last one that we haven't done a walkthrough for. So before we do walkthroughs of all the other books, we figure we'll hit all the Worlds of Cypher books. So we're going through Unmasked by Dennis Detwiller. And before we even get into that, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and give us a follow and subscribe here if you can on Twitch. We greatly appreciate it. It helps us out tremendously. So Dean, let's talk about Unmasked.
Well, okay, that sounds good. So what we're going to do is we're going to, give you the basic summary before we jump in there. So this was written by Dennis Detwiller, very good friend of MCG, the MCG crew. So the summary of it is superpowers and horror in the dark 80s. Top Gun is in the theaters. Papa Don't Preach is on the radio. Halley's Comet is in the sky. And Iran-Contra is in the news. The Soviets are in Afghanistan, and the doomsday clock is at 3 minutes until midnight. But there's something else going on, something even bigger. At school, at the mall, down by 7-Eleven, you started noticing things. Is that a troll doll really going? Is that a cassette tape calling to you? Why doesn't anyone else seem to notice? And when you follow that strange compulsion to create a mask from these items, you become someone else. Someone with capabilities the world has never seen and goals that may not be your own. The mask gives you unimaginable power, but can you resist its agenda? And there are others starting to show up too, who may have embraced their masks' darker sides. Maybe the doomsday clock matters after all. And that's the opening to the book. This is, an era that, some of us grew up in, namely me, very, very much as a teenager during those years. And
Anthony, to tell the truth, you was a 50s boy. I'm the 80s kid here.
No, bro, I was in 1986, man. I was what, a freshman? No.
You was wearing Mickey Mantle t-shirt.
I was a junior in high school in 1986. So yes, I'm dating myself. Yep, that's 86. I was a junior in high school. So this stuff right here is this is right up my alley. It's great, I mean, this book includes a complete campaign ready to play, a setting of superpowers and psychological horror for the Cypher. 4 new types, a few new foci, new approach to superpowers. It's pretty cool, pretty cool stuff.
I was definitely an 80s boy. The 80s was my era. The birth of hip hop. The real good rock and roll music was coming out of the 80s.
Like I said, that was the year before that was the year I did basic training, because I did a split program. I did basic training in 86 and AIT in 1987. So yeah, military boy at that time, boy. It was good stuff, man.
Yeah, before we go through the walkthrough, I'm gonna say this. When the Worlds of Cypher first came out, right? This was, I'll tell you at the end whether or not it was successful or not, but this was the book I was most excited for. And that's saying a lot, because, Gods of the Fall and Predation, the advertisement for those 2 books was freaking awesome. But when I saw Unmasked, this was the book that I was the most excited for on the Worlds of Cypher when they're not during the Kickstarter.
You and me both.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody knows how I feel about superheroes. I mean, we actually had a pretty good game that we ran in that too when it first came out.
Oh yeah, that game was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was the first campaign we ever played together.
Yeah, it was pretty out, because Al was driving like a maniac. Yep, that was awesome. And you played the heater.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite characters of all time.
So let's jump right in, and let's break it down.
It would be nice if I had the Unmasked PDF open. I got it open now. Okay, we're good to go. Technical difficulties. Of course, it opens up with Dennis giving a little intro about his love of comic books and his love of the 80s. You know, it's a I always love to read these intros, even though they probably have nothing really to do with the overall quality of a book. I just like to see the perspective of the writer. And Dennis does a great job with his.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely a great opening, and to see his worldview and creating such a book, And then of course, chapter 1 talks about the world of Unmasked in of itself.
Yep, it has a little short story in the very beginning, give you an idea of like the general overall concept of the setting, which is pretty cool. I always like when they do this as well. And the first thing that jumps out to me is that the layout on this book is unlike any other layout prior or since of any of the MCG books. It's very unique to Unmasked. I love it. I love the 80s triangles, the Saved by the Bell, like the little like
it was Trapper Keepers, dude. What are you talking about? Saved by the Bell. That's Saved by the Bell is the 90s. That's some other kids. We talking about the 80s. We're talking about Trapper Keepers. We're talking about cassette tapes.
No, I mean the little triangles. You ever seen
right? That's what I'm saying. Remember
they had those triangles, dude.
That's what I'm saying. Remember on the Trapper Keepers, that was how you put your stuff in, and they had the little triangles to keep your stuff and put your little notes on and stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
This is very Saved by the Bell aesthetic, dude. There's nothing you can tell me that it isn't. The bright pinks, the pastel colors in triangles.
We did that in the 80s before Saved by the Bell. Saved by the Bell is a 90s cartoon or 90s show.
Not even a cartoon, but
it's a 90s show. I mean, that was Screech and all of that stuff. I was well out of high school when that was on TV.
And I was telling you, you were in the 50s. You confused me.
You're so stupid. Oh, this guy over here. Why do I have to put up with this? He just want to insult me.
All right, enough joking around. Chapter 1, it's basically the world of Unmasked. They break it down. They, give you references to, so you can get the overall theme of what the setting entails. They break down the actual backstory and what was going on in the 80s. They give you movie references so you could Back to the Future, Better Off Dead, Breakfast Club, E.T., Fast Times at Richmond High, one of the funniest movies of all time, Gremlins.
Spicoli, man.
Yeah.
Dude.
So it gives you like a good idea. It gives you ideas if you want to run Unmasked in other settings, the 1920s, the 60s. If you want to bring the concept of Unmasked to more of a modern day, 2000s, how to do that. Gives you some more movie references. Okay, Dean?
I was just going to say, one of the coolest things too about this was that each part of the book, it's kind of set up. It starts with a little story, to kind of set the stage for what you're going to get into. So each part of the book, as it's broken down, part 1, has a story called a kid called The End of the World, and then that overview, it sets up for the overview of chapters, 1 through 4, I think it is, before you get to part 2.
Dean, for the record, Saved by the Bell was 1988.
That's 1990s, dude. Like I said, I was well out of high school. That's why I didn't buy. Yeah, okay. 88. Well, I was well out of high school, dude. I was like jumping out of planes by then, so. Oh man, that's cool. But hey, it still works, right?
Yep. So they give you a bunch of music that from the area. It got Russian there. Like I said, the 80s had the
80s had the most. The 80s had the most eclectic.
Yeah.
We had the most eclectic music ever because we listened to everything. That was the British invasion. We had rock and roll, hip hop, rap music, R&B, soul, everything just was a big amalgamation. And no matter what you were doing, I mean, we were listening to, Hall and Oates right next to Run DMC, right next to Spandau Ballet. It was
Guns N'
awesome.
Roses, Duran Duran, yeah.
Exactly. The British sound, Duran Duran. What was it?
Steve, I definitely, you don't know the 80s, dude. The British invasion was the 60s. I'm telling you, man, you're a 60 guy. The British
No, the British invasion, you're talking about the British invasion with the Beatles. That was the initial thing. But when you think about it, Duran Duran,
They're not British. Duran Duran's Australian.
It was put it this way, a bunch of foreigners. How about that? Put it that way. Because we had Men at Work for Australians. We had what's the Careless Whisper guys, Wham, all of that stuff. It was just there. I was there, dude. I was there. It wasn't in the 60s.
So in chat, they said Dean's immortal, so he doesn't know his time, his decades.
You guys got jokes now. Funny people. I'm immortal. Oh, man.
Well, anyway, the 80s freaking rocked.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. And the 80s music freaking rocked. Chapter 2 is the basic overview, right? It explains exactly what a prodigy is. And you see that referred to a lot in the book, but a prodigy is essentially the teenagers that have superpowers.
Correct.
Yeah. And they generate their powers from these masks that they create themselves.
So basically, let's break that down. Let's kind of break it, and they talk about that later on in the thing, but we'll talk about it in more depth. But here's the idea behind it. They, like we said earlier in the intro, you start getting these callings to mundane things in the world, troll dolls and cassette tapes and neon socks and so on and so forth. And you get this urge to get these things and put them together and make a mask. And when you make the mask and you finally put the mask on, that's when you change. That's where your superpowers come from. And you become a completely new creature, which is kind of wild. It's really a wild concept. So. Yeah.
The setting on this is truly original. Like when we played in it, there was so many possibilities that you could go with. And I know the teenage, the teen route is the one that most people are going to gravitate towards. But I like the concept of, maybe middle-aged or elderly people generating mass. I thought that would be really cool to do. We never got around to doing it, but I thought that would have been a really cool way of
one of the things I did with this particular concept was what I like doing was the fact that when you got to a certain age, you could no longer access the power of the mask. And so what I did was I played it like I had a group of people play at one time, a one shot at a game store where I had kids in the 90s, kids in the 2000s finding their parents' masks. And they ended up with the powers, but what was crazy about it, it was not the exact same powers that their parents had. But when they donned the mask, they became superheroes. So it's stuff like that, it's like you were saying it, find people middle age. But I did it like it was generational. So like after 22, 23, you could no longer access the powers of the mask.
Brilliant Loser asked, while you guys are arguing about the 80s, what was your hair back then? 86, I was a freshman in high school in the back end of the 80s. So I had, believe it or not, and I'll share a picture on Discord, but I had dreads well past my shoulders.
I had, in 1986, I actually have a picture too. I can put it up for you guys. I had a wave cut, real short haircut. Yeah, I thought I was Rico Suave back then.
Yeah, I was dating Mary Jane all through high school. So I pretty much look like the guy from True Romance to the white boy day.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been one to try to keep my hair. I was kind of the clean cut guy. That was, I thought I thought I had style. You couldn't tell me nothing. I'm gonna put a picture up though. I don't know if you guys remember.
I'll find a high school picture. I'll put one up too. But yeah,
I don't know if you guys remember Miami Vice, but I used to dress like kind of like Crockett, the t-shirts, the suit coats, and stuff like that.
Totally off topic, but yo, Dean, 8th grade, my junior high school graduation, I had the exact Miami Vice Tubbs outfit. Down to the no socks and the pink, those pink like slip-on shoes.
Yep.
I swear to God.
I'm gonna put the picture up. I got a picture of me in one of my suits. I'm thinking that when I had the turtleneck in the gray coat. I'm gonna find it. I got a picture for you guys. Yeah, we'll put it up on the server.
That's hilarious. It's hilarious that you even say that, because that was like that and the Spud McKenzie t-shirts.
Come on, man. That was the stuff of the 80s. Come on, man. You gotta be.
All right, let's go back on topic. At the end of chapter 2, they go over mementos. Mementos are what they called ciphers in Unmasked.
And that's something we should point out. If you think about the Worlds of the Cipher System books, they all gave ciphers a different name, but they were still the same thing. It was a way to try to get you to, break your thought process and being able to adapt ciphers to any game you wanted. So that was why they kind of did that. It was a great idea, but mementos were really interesting because they were always things unique to the 80s. Mm-hmm. That, the ciphers were. They did, all the same stuff, but they were unique to that time period.
Also, it's better, we should say this, that for those of you that haven't been following Cipher System since the early Cipher setting books, this was pre the remake of the revised Cipher core book.
Right.
So some of the rules in here do not align with the way the current Cipher core book is. So it's just worth mentioning. So part 2 breaks down into the prodigies and the boardwalk. And then it gives you the second part to the short story.
Right. And
okay.
No, go ahead.
Chapter 3 is where we get into character creation.
Right. And basically it gives you a brief rundown of the character creation. It was kind of cool because, it was that different approach, because this was the first time you technically had 2 characters on one sheet. And when you made your character, your team form just had a descriptor, no foci. And what was it, 9 points that you had total or something along those lines? It was a little bit different. It kind of broke the mold for how you're used to creating characters in Cipher System.
And it also, I think it opened up the possibility, or at least for me, when I first saw this, it opened up the possibility of the idea of a quick character, like a quick and dirty character. That, like, I don't know if you remember when I did Alien Cowboys versus Aliens, and I had you guys all play Native Americans for the first scene of the game. And I gave you these quick and dirty stats. I got that from Unmasked. It's like you could give people like not to say insequential, but use this same concept for if you want your players to play someone other than their main character for a quick scene. You could follow the same concept. Just give them a few stat numbers, maybe one word or 2 words to the sentence. And because they only playing it out for one scene, you could do that. But the reason why in this game that they had a separate stat sheet is because you really concentrating on your hero, but the teenagers themselves, before they put on the mask and transform into these heroes, still have personality and abilities. It's just that they're not a fully they weren't considered a full adult.
You know,
Yeah.
because they weren't a full adult. Like all your pools for your teens started at 6.
Yeah.
So it was only 18 points instead of 28 points, and you only had 2 additional stat points, you know, to even your teen out, which was, you know, interesting. And like I said, it was a little different, but it was fun playing yourself in your teen form versus just always being in your hero form. You know, and there was a lot of things that you could do. Because I mean, I ran you guys in the one campaign, and then I ran another one on the server, which was like I did kind of like Fast Times at Ridgemont High style game, and I took the players through their entire freshman year. It was like I think I did it in like 11 or 12 episodes, but I took them through their entire freshman year, and it was really cool. And it really worked out by having those two different sides, and it was fun to see people differentiate between, you know, how would they change. They really did change characters. They were confident and strong, where you had the, you know, the nerdy acne ridden guy who could never talk to a girl. We had one guy in a wheelchair. He played a handicapped person, the handicapped kid in school. It was just really, as much as we had our issues with it, and we're going to tell you what our issues were with it, the setting itself lends itself to some great gaming.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely get into our issues part, but not only the setting itself, but what it added to Cypher system was very impactful, because they were doing things that hadn't. I mean, Dennis was approaching like design concepts that the Cypher system hadn't like begin to even touch at the time. So from that start, like this is the first book that really utilized power shifts aside from the CSR. And not only did they utilize power shifts in the same chapter, you get additional power shifts on top of the 5 you got that were just, unique to Unmasked.
Like, and something else that it did, which I'm just looking at and realizing it also did something. I mean, and I guess it was the design aesthetic that Sean realized. It was the first one that added descriptors that were unique, that uniquely fit the setting. You know what I'm saying? The new descriptors that were put in.
I don't remember what was the order of you probably remember better than me, Dean, but what was the order of the 3 Worlds of Cypher books released?
Oh, Gods of the Fall, Predation, and Unmasked was the last one.
So Unmasked was the 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, it did those things like, and the descriptors were very much 80s. The new descriptors were metalhead, punk, new wave, and show off, So this was like, if you were in the 80s and understood that, the new wave, the kids that were into the new wave music, which was, kind of what you would say the intro to, more like electronica and stuff like that type of music. It was just different, and it was, but everybody had a style about them,
All right, just before we even go further down, just so we go over the power shift section as well, the power shifts were connected to the mask.
Right.
As opposed to a normal superhero setting where your character has, in this one, the mask actually had the shifts. And you got a free power shift called Prodigy Sight, which essentially that let you, everyone that was a prodigy and had shifts were able to sense and see each other. So like if you was a prodigy, anyone else that was a prodigy, you had the ability to, it was sort of like was a Highlander, like a Highlander person knows another person that has Highlander.
Right. It's like you could see it.
Yeah.
You could always see that their nature. Yeah. And it was an interesting thing because depending on how you wanted to play it, various things could happen and how you wanted to play it when people started looking through that lens. These were aspects that I think many people missed sometimes, and I don't think they embraced the actual those cool aspects. You know, it was something as a GM you kind of had to kind of help your players realize that they could do these things.
Yeah. And Dennis wrote a great section on how to GM prodigies, how to make challenging campaigns, or how to start your game. He did a whole section on that, which was really cool. And then, yeah, he gives you a ton. It's like 3 or 4 pages. And then chapter 5, it's actually creating the team.
Right.
And coming up with the team descriptors, like what you said. The team itself, you would write a name, and then you basically have just a descriptor for your team.
Right.
And you had what, 12 points?
18 points. You had 6. You had 6 in every stat, and then you had 2. And then you had 2 additional points to add, which was really cool. And the thing I really liked about it too was this also. It had literally 100 different connections for you to have for your character. So if you rolled, percentile dice, literally there were 100 different ways for you to find connections and backgrounds to characters. That is unprecedented. I mean, that's just crazy, but it's.
And you know what's funny? If you like Kids on Bike, right? Like Kids on Bikes, like games like that,
or Tales from the Loop. Yeah.
Or just you want to play a Stand By Me story, right? Any of the coming of age stories. You could use the first chapter of this book and just use these stats and these descriptors to do your 16 candles, to do your, Super Bad if we do it.
Any of those movies like that, Goonies, it would be great for Goonies.
They basically, he basically gives you all the descriptors that, the cliche descriptors of all those teen movies like Metalhead and Punk, New Wave, I mean? And they all,
the show off, I mean, you literally could run Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I really love the fact that, Sandlot is a great one. Yeah, you could run Sandlot with just this one chapter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're killing me, Smalls.
Yeah, I love the like he writes a little whole section on how teens should utilize skills and how to think about it when you're playing a team. And then he has a whole background connection table that you could roll against.
That's what I was just talking about. 100. There's 100 background connections.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's crazy. But they all work.
Yeah, and they all the high school problems. Like you just pick one out of random.
You're a notorious graffiti artist the town is desperately searching for, Or you live with your aunt and uncle and they barely tolerate you. Your parents aren't in the picture. You're
a nice person and refuse to fall in with bullies who pick on people, but everyone knows this. The cool ones.
Or your mom is the town doctor, or your dad is the sheriff, all these things that and that's the other cool part about it was this is all set in the typical 80.
He gives you 100.
That's what I said. There's 100 individual, descriptors.
Yeah.
As I said, it's unprecedented that we got 100 exact, you know what I mean? But that's the other thing. All those movies would take place in small town America, and so they literally give you an entire town. They give you a whole town worked out that you can make fit anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. Which is really cool.
Chapter 6 is where they actually break down, and here's where you build your super. Because like we said, the mass, the mass is what makes you a prodigy, right? So the mass is going to have the descriptor, and it has 4 unique types. Like I think the 3 original Worlds of Cypher book went slightly different to all the other setting books after revised, where they basically let you use the revised book and you use those types. But Predation, Gods of the Four, and Unmasked was no different. They created unique types for the setting, similar to Numenera and the Strange. So the 4 setting types in chapter 6, when they break down, if you're creating a prodigy, the types are Smasher, thinker, mover, and shaper.
All right. And see, the thought process is, if you really look at it, they just show you, they were showing us the versatility once again of Cypher System before they gave us the revised book, where the revised book gave us, the baseline types, and now, it gave us direction on how to modify types so we can make unique types for our own, our own games and so on and so forth. I think that's something, it's really funny we're talking about this, and it makes me realize that we had an advantage, Anthony, by coming to Cypher System before the revised book. So we kind of already understood what the revised book was leaning into, because we saw from Gods of the Fall, from Predation, from Unmasked, this thing about doing the characters, making them unique unto themselves, the types, I should say. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it's really cool because, like, these types embrace the archetypes that you typically see in a comic book. The smasher, your strong guy, your martial arts guy, or you're
the Hulk, the Thing type.
The Hulk, the Thing, exactly. Movers where your characters like the Flash and Spider-Man, and thinkers, of course, where your Mr. Fantastics and Brainiac and stuff like that. And your shapers were, your Doctor Stranges and your Cyclops, people who were going to be shooting beams out their hands and eyes and so on and so forth. So it really brought us to a place where the idea of versatility and the idea of being able to create what you wanted as a character was kind of built right into the types. So,
yeah. And honestly, you could use the revised, if you wanted to, instead of building your own PCs from the revised book all the way, Claim the Sky does it, you could easily port over the Claim the Sky method into your Unmasked game, or vice versa. If you wanted to use the Unmasked like character creation in Claim the Sky setting book or the origin, you easily can do that as well.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, MCG is pretty much interchangeable. It's plug and play.
You just said something, and I didn't even think about that, but when you said it, it just brought a whole new thought process, like with the origin. Origin and this could marry so beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah, they could marry. You could do some really wild stuff, because I do love the origin as a setting book, but that's another video.
And once again, if you're just picking up this book for the first time, some of the abilities and costs might be slightly different from the revised book, because just remember that this was everything pre-revised. So, and they made some changes in revised. So you would, as the GM, you would just have to like cross-reference and double check and figure out which definition of the ability you want to use personally, because there were some slight changes.
And they do make reference to expanded worlds, which technically is still useful, but a lot of stuff that was in expanded worlds is now in the Cypher System core book too, in the revised edition. But there are still some things unique to that book as well.
They give you a pretty good framework between these 4 types on how to build most heroes. And here's where we might start hitting into a roadblock. I think that that there is a decent framework to get a game, a superhero game going with this and the Cypher, the original Cypher book. But at the time, it was slightly lacking to touch all the superheroes that you would want to play.
Right. To be honest, this is why we became, this is where we became creative and started hacking the system, because this is where we started using power stunts way back then. We came up with our own version of how power stunts are, Sean, of course, revised that concept, because what we did was I had people give up a power shift to get a power stunt, like I said, one of the most famous ones is with Anthony's character, the Heater. He gave up a power shift to create a power snap that he had. He called it the triple play, and he would, throw his flaming baseball up, and when he smacked it with his bat, it would burst into 3 flaming fireballs that he could hit 3 different targets with. Stuff like that. That we did early on, but now there are rules for it in Claim the Sky.
And it's also worth mentioning that when you were crafting a character, not only did you have your abilities from your super in the prodigy form, your mass form also gave you one additional ability, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like getting an extra power every tier.
And the other thing too, just a thing to throw out there, was that before you put your mask on, you would craft your mask, and your mask really looked like, something made from household materials. But when you put the mask on, you would transform, and your mask and everything would then become, it would look like it was, professionally made, if you will. That was something else that was unique about this, that, you had this mask that had, a cassette tape on the forehead, and it was painted, it was paper mache, and, had all this stupid stuff on it. And it just looked like, literally something you made in your your basement. But then when you put it on, that's when you would transform. So it was, and the mask talked to you, it called to you, it was, there were a lot of elements. And when we get further down and start talking about the setting itself, we'll start talking about the uniqueness of the setting in of itself. But
so chapter 6 was basically the mass form, the descriptor, and choosing a type, right? Chapter 7, it focuses on what Dean just said, creating the mask, and your character's focus came from the mask form. So it explains basically what Dean said, how to create a mask form for the PCs. It introduces 4 new foci. Here's where the new foci come in, and here's where it comes: flies by night, lives on the dark side, travels back from the future, and wants to be adored. Were the only 4 foci added onto this, which is, at the time,
we had an issue.
We had a serious issue.
This was the reason why I ended up writing the heroic mixtape, which introduced 10. I created 10 foci, and if anybody who has it knows that I literally did a double version. I did one version of the foci that was directly related to the setting, and then I did another version in the side, in the margins, that where you could play it as a normal superhero if you wanted to run just a regular supers game. So yeah, it forced me to create 10 new foci, which at the time
I will say this: all 4 foci that are in this book, all 4 of the focuses that are in this book, are kick-ass.
Yes.
They just weren't enough.
Right.
At the time, to make a superhero, for its MCG's first initial attempt at superheroes, they just weren't enough.
Well, you got to remember, and it was a different time too, because remember how foci were done then as well. Mm-hmm. They were completely written out. Every foci was, in front of you like that, as opposed to how when they did it in the revised edition and they broke down all the abilities and powers and everything else, you had to kind of slog through, So yeah, it really wasn't enough. As me and Anthony say, I think the first thing everybody looks at, the first 2 things I look at when I pick up a superhero book, is the powers list and the character sheet. Yeah,
pretty much. But I will say this, that I think this book has aged better with time due to the other books that have come out afterwards.
Yes, absolutely.
Because at the time I did, I'm being 100% honest. At the time I didn't view Unmasked kindly, but now that all these other superheroes books are out, Unmasked has a lot of cool things that could be incorporated. One, the setting is freaking awesome. And two, is that now you could flesh out these folk eyes and these characters, like the abilities they do have in here. You know, it has way more potential now that the cipher system is revised and you have Claim the Sky to, you know, to add on to this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's funny. It was a disappointment when it first came out because we were all disappointed. And it was that the biggest disappointment was there wasn't enough, you know, new power. It wasn't enough foci. But now this book becomes a magnificent resource and it's a huge reference book now.
Not only is it a reference book, it's a setting that I think most people would enjoy to go back.
Setting, like I said, I can't wait till we get to the chapter to start talking about it because the setting it's one of the coolest settings. You know, like you said, it's different, it's unique. It's just something that hadn't been done. Yep. But it was very 80s.
And it's, you know, everyone likes the coming of age stories. So, you know, it's not even like the coming of age story could be done at you know, in any era. And chapter 8 goes into the power shifts. And this is the first book. Actually, no, Gods of the Fall also dealt with power shifts. But they actually have more power shifts than the original Cypher System book had. Because they had
guidelines. Remember how they had kind of guidelines for how to define power shifts? Remember there was like, you know, there was what was it? Restricted in scope, you know, things that were addictive to the PC or attached to. So yeah, it was you know, different in that respect.
You know what, Dean? Some of these power shifts should be incorporated in the revived series. So I don't know why they're not. Like social is a cool power shift when you want to use power shifts and not be a fantastical setting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You know, social,
Psycho Killer. Some of
or listen, even think about it. Even like the Speed Freak, you could modify that to, you know, especially if you're doing like a modern, you know, or you're doing like you know, what's it, Fast and the Furious or something. You know, stuff like that would work. I mean, all of these actually. I would definitely put these power shifts, make these available to people in my Claim the Sky games or even in my Origin games.
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing that, to be honest. I love when we do these walkthroughs, especially these books that, you know, that I'm not currently reading, because I always go back and find something that I'll be like, yo, you know, this was really cool design. That you're absolutely right, because there's 16 power shifts in this book. Right, and what's the normal power shift is what, 10 or 9?
9 or 10. I mean, I think you will, now that they added Flight and Savant, and you know, so there was a few added in Claim the Sky. But the reality of what you're saying is, these are kind of specific. They're kind of, you know, some of them are restricted in scope, so it kind of makes it work for other things, other games that if you wanted to add power shifts to a modern game, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is related to being heroic. So you can say everybody gets one power shift, but they can have one of these.
Yeah, and also, it's also worth mentioning that when we mean about using them, we not mean using them verbatim. You have to actually hack them because they all say in mass form. So you got to remove that and just give them the plain power shift.
Correct. Yeah. You know, and Anthony made an excellent point. These are older books, so they sit on our shelves, and until we do a walkthrough or, you know, you get that wild burr of your ass that you want to, you know, run an older game, you don't touch them or you don't think about them. And then again, like we said, doing the walkthroughs just brings it back to the forefront, and that is really cool because now I find myself, you know, touching this book again, you know, and really looking at it as far as what I'm going to do next. So
so after that, after they go over, they also, just before we exit power shifts, he gives you a little example on what defines a power shift, why characters would have power shifts, pushing past their limit, what makes a power shift, separates them from supers from normal mortals, and it's a pretty good explanation. So if you haven't played a game that utilizes power shifts, Dennis gives you a good explanation on why it makes sense in the Cypher system. There's similar in any of the setting books that use power shifts. They have a similar chapter, a similar definition, but it's still good to read nonetheless.
Yeah, and then we move right into part 3. Welcome to 1986 True Colors.
The next 5 chapters are all based on the setting.
Right. And this is where we were talking about where it gets interesting, and it also gets scary. This is where we learn that we're not just in a superhero setting, we're in a psychological horror superhero setting. This is where we start learning about what's going on behind the scenes and what's moving the world forward. And certain things are left kind of ambiguous, which is cool because it gives you a chance to answer those questions, like why only the teens are being affected, why, but it also leans into the typicality of the era, where if you watch those movies, like we were talking about, you watch the movies, like E.T. and so on and so forth, parents were always seemed to be oblivious, and the kids were always the ones who were finding the crazy stuff that was going on. So this was one of those things that it fed off of that. And if you looked at, movies of the era, like Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Warriors, that's a prime example of what Unmasked kind of leaned into, So.
Yeah, it's basically the first chapter 9 basically breaks down the 80s for someone that didn't grow up in the 80s. It gives you, a general idea of exactly what the 80s is. And then chapter 10 breaks down the act. It's based in a small town in upstate New York. So chapter 10 basically breaks down that town. And I will say this, Dennis provides you with everything, including maps that you need to run in this town. Hands down, it's very well laid. Not only is it well laid out, he gives you all the NPCs, locations, imagery of all those places. So it's very easy to run a full campaign with just this book in this town, because everything you need to know is provided in this book. I wanted to touch on something Key Bounce mentioned. So I'm hearing that there are updates needed in this book to bring it up with current revised rules. Absolutely, I will 100% agree with that.
Yeah. But the reality of it is
updates to do though.
Yeah, they're simple. It's not like MCG needs to write an errata or anything for it, because like we've all said, the CSR, the revised edition of the Cypher System rulebook is completely compatible with the original one.
I agree and slightly disagree. I don't think it would hurt to write an errata for the Worlds of Cypher.
Oh, it wouldn't hurt. I'm not saying it would hurt. I'm just saying it doesn't have to. I mean, you could do it yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. But yeah, but I'm not going to complain if they're going to do it for me.
Thank you.
I wouldn't complain if they did it for me.
Oh, no, I wouldn't complain. Who would?
So chapter 10 is basically breaking down the city itself. They go over the local train station, the bad part of town, the hospital, the name, where's it located, if there's street gangs, like the local town thugs, how does the police, the fire department, the ambulance service works. They even give you NPC names, which is always awesome and good to have. There's a local college in the area, so the high schools want to interact with the college kids, you could do scenes like that. I mean, it pretty much basically breaks down this entire town.
What was really cool about that too, because if you remember correctly, I remember I made you guys freshmen in college when we played. We did you guys, it was you guys that graduated from high school, and that was the night that everything happened, which was awesome. You know, the night they graduated from high school, so they went to the local college. It was just a lot of fun. I mean, just a lot of the different aspects. It was very inspirational, you know, and I love a good setting that inspires me to be creative. You know, that's always like to me an imperative. And they did a great job with it. Like Anthony was saying, you know, the school, they detailed the high school, and you know, I think even detailed a rival high school like in a town nearby. Of course, the threat, the big picture. This was just like a really well thought out you know, section of the book.
I really appreciate the art style in this book. Not only is the layout fantastic, it seems like I don't know if they had one artist do all the imagery or two or three artists, but I think that they're all very similar. Like the style, the way they're drawn. I love the pastel colors. It's just really pretty, you know, pretty and visual.
It evoked. It made me feel like I was looking at, you know, that time frame, you know, like the pictures of the malls and stuff like that, the stores, and you know, and then when they show like the graffiti on the walls, and you know, just all the different aspects, like you said, the artwork really was evocative, and it took me back to that time.
Yep. So like what you said, chapter 11 is all about the high school, whether your characters are in public high school or private high school, he fully fleshes out both. He has a neighboring town and for both, whether you're doing public or private, he has like the enemy school for both.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives you where all the kids hide out and hang out after school. So he breaks down what the classrooms are like, teachers and staffs for all the schools, how to handle, you know, GMing teacher and player confrontations.
Yeah.
What time the school closes, what's going on, security for the schools.
Yeah.
You know, he pretty much breaks it down, you know, without getting into full specifics, but he pretty much breaks down how to GM in a high school.
Right. I mean, what it does, the way I see it is that, like you said, it breaks it down. It gives you just enough pieces to, you know, put it all together. And I would suggest to anybody who wants to run these games, you know, take you some time and, you know, watch a bunch of movies from the 80s. You know, watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you know, watch 16 Candles, you know, because even though those movies weren't about superheroes or anything like that, it was very much the 80s, and it was very much high school, you know.
But I mean, he goes beyond that, though. He gives you advice on pretty much everything in high school in the book.
I know that. I'm saying if you wanted to expand it even further, is what I was saying. You know.
Yeah, I mean, this, like the setting stuff itself, he provides you with a ton of resources. And I think the majority of this book is teaching you how to run in this setting, which is, like I said, now that you have a lot more superhero mechanics instituted with the revised edition, Claim the Sky and Origin, this book becomes a lot more useful.
Way more. Yeah. And then the other cool part is like when you get to chapter 12, it's called The Threat, but it's literally all the threats. Yeah. You know, mundane threats. You know, you got to deal with the school staff, you know, teachers and security and janitors. You got to deal with reporters. You got to deal with the media of the time and so on and so forth, police and fire departments, you know, the military, you know. It was really cool that he didn't just tell you that you had you had to deal with other prodigies. It wasn't just, you know, superheroes fighting superheroes. You had, you know, all these things on top of dealing with, you know, other prodigies, you know, minions and manifestations, you know, and then like human servants of bad guys. And then, of course, the big bad, you know, and the big bad was quite interesting and different, if you ask me. I don't know how you felt about it, Ant, but
You're talking about the adventures, the mini
yeah, well, what
adventures?
I'm saying, the overall scope of the characters, like the big bad Prester John, you know, that concept was just crazy because again, it was never fully defined, but yet and still, this was the big bad. This thing was after the prodigies, or was it after their masks? But there was this weird connection that was overarching upon everything else that was going on in the setting, and that's where the horror and the psychology of it all came together.
Not only that, he breaks it down and gives you like mini campaign ideas for each tier. So he gives you a tier 1, a tier 2 for each.
Mhm.
Breaks it down like the tiers are breaking down into like semesters or school years.
School years. Like I said, I did that. I ran the freshman year. I ran the players as tier 1 characters through freshman year.
So he gives you essentially a 4-year story arc that he does most of the work for you. So you
Right.
could basically just run off of chapter 13 and do a full story arc. And he gives you most of the story ideas, which is freaking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that he did that. I mean, literally, you know, but he does go through tier 6, you know, like if you wanted to do it by seasons of year and so on and so forth. Just so much, you know, it was a lot of just a lot of canon, a lot of fodder for you
You
to
know
work with.
what it kind of reminds me of? Because the way he even labels it, he'll do the spiritual revelation arc. It kind of reminds me of My Hero Academia, because
Yeah.
they'll have like a year arc, and then the next school year it's something entirely different. It kind of gives me the My Hero Academia vibe.
Yeah. And then of course, you know, from there, from chapter 13, we move right into part 4, which is Welcome to Boundary Bay, New York.
Mm.
And Boundary Bay is the fictional city that they create for you, upstate New York. You know, those of us who live in New York State, you know, even the people who live in the city have been upstate.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Long Island, New York. It's not upstate. That's sacrilegious. Yeah, I misread it. I misspoke the first time. It's Long Island.
Where they said it's supposed to be an allegory to Long Island.
No, Boundary Bay is Long Island, New York. It's in New York.
Oh, I know that, but if you read the setting, I know, but the setting they basically kind of make it like it's upstate as well. And then they got to be wrong.
No, it's Suffolk County. That's Long Island.
Oh, okay, cool. But yeah,
I'm a New York City kid. I definitely know what's in the 5 boroughs.
Oh, I understand. I wouldn't argue with that. You know, but this is, like I said, though, this is like really cool the way he breaks down, you know, the Boundary Bay, how he breaks down the city itself.
The NPCs, this is extremely fleshed out.
And if you look at, and if you have the book or you have opportunity to ever look at the maps are awesome.
I mean, there is literally 4 pages of just NPCs, high school students.
Yep.
Full 2-paragraph descriptions of each.
Yeah, you know, there's hooks. There's, you know, they talk about different places, the social club, Schaefer Marina. You know, they break down, you know, all of this in Long Island, you know, the Strand, beach houses, Schaefer Marina, Assembly Yards House, you know, all of these aspects that when you sit down as a player and as a GM, you have all the tools you need.
Yeah, and not only like all it gives you all these locations, and on the description of the location, I think this is also really cool. Like it'll give you a description, like I just picked the Pixel Palace arcade, right? It gives you a description of the arcade, everything that's entails in the arcade. He even writes out what are the popular games in the arcade.
Yeah.
And for each one, he gives you 4 or 5 NPCs that inhabit that area with a full write-up.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You know, characters that are, you know, really good on this game or that game, you know, trying to, you know, beat people's high score, you know.
Well, not only that, it's a full write-up on the character, like why they, not even what games they play, but if they have superpowers, if they have them, if
Right.
if they are prodigies, do they, why are they spending time in this particular location? Like, so it gives you plot hooks.
Yep.
I always appreciate a setting book where I could just pick something random and develop a story arc from a random, either NPC or a random place. You know, anything that generates story ideas or like narrative ideas for me is it's always a plus.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is where this book truly shines, is the use of building the setting. This setting is robust. You know, is really the best word to say. It's robust. It has, you literally don't have to do anything else. But if you're like me or you're like Anthony, it's going to inspire you. You can't help it. You're not going to help but be able to expand, and it gives you everything that you can to expand on it. You know.
Yeah, it's freaking awesome. Yeah, and then it's each setting, it gives you a plot idea. Oh, I love this picture, the picture of the family playing D&D.
Yeah, yeah.
Page 125. It's 125 in the book, so it's probably 127 in the PDF.
On the PDF, yeah.
Yeah, that picture's awesome.
Most of the art in this, like you said, most of the art in this book is great, you know. And then, of course, we move into, you know, chapter 15, which talks about organizations and creatures, you know. And so it basically breaks down, like, you know, the media threat, you know, and it talks about the different papers. It talks about the reporters, you know. Then it goes into the military threat, you know, it talks about aspects of that, you know, plans and methods that the military is using to try to figure out what's going on, you know. Then, of course, it goes into the preternatural threats, which are, you know, other prodigies, and, you know, the scary, you know, Prester John, you know, the overarching story. Talks about different kinds of villains, masterminds, and so on and so forth. It's just good. It's crazy, you know. And then, like, when you look at, especially for back then, you know, Prester John was a level 9 villain. That was just, what in the hell are we gonna do with this guy? You know.
Actually, Dean, this is the monster section.
Yeah, it is.
Like, any good setting book needs a monster section. You know, this is the baddies section, the write-ups. I will say this was another one at the time I was expecting a little bit more creatures than maybe it's like my thinking that I'm not a very setting specific gamer. You know what I mean? So when I pick up a setting, you know, I want an abundance of mechanics, an abundance of monsters, an abundance of abilities, because I tend to even take setting books to create my own games.
Oh, absolutely.
But I will say this, at the time, you go to the creature section and you see 4 or 5 creature stats, you are slightly disappointed, you know.
Well, you know, and I agree, but then on the same voice, I have to go back to the previous chapter and look at all the other NPCs that he gave us.
Yeah, but I like stat blocks. I like looking at stat blocks. I like looking at cool creatures.
Oh, I understand that too. I get that, but I'm just saying, for me, that was I was like on the fence with that, but we definitely agreed that there wasn't enough abilities in there. There was only 4 foci, you know. But then
And
if you look at it, there's 4 foci with how many, 4 or 5 abilities per tier. And if you blow them apart the way Cypher system did, now you can look at it as it being a whole lot more abilities. But at the time, it was truly focused into that particular area.
yeah, at the time, this book was more dedicated to the setting. Like the
Exactly.
setting. If you want super bad guys, use the CSR or just pull something out of Numenera. Like this book was 70% setting. You know what I mean? But I also I like looking at monster sections. The creatures that are in this book are really cool and unique. They just wasn't enough of them. Actually, I said 5. There's only 3 creatures in this book that are statted out.
Yeah, 3.
That is kind of low for a superhero book.
Yeah, it's again, I will not argue that point, that it is what it is, So then we move on to chapter 16, which is a section, it's about 10 pages, and it's literally on running unmasked. It literally talks about running the game in of itself. Really good section, and it basically talks about flavors of Unmasked. So you can run it as a horror game, a power fantasy, a teen comedy, a mixture of flavors. Basically talks about how to run an average Unmasked session. I think this section was, especially running the session, it was priceless at the time, and it was priceless for my game because it kind of gave me a tonal quality and a pacing. It gave me an idea for pacing, which I think is great.
Also, this is one of those sections that goes outside of running unmasked. The advice given here, the examples for the team problems, for the school issues, could be used in any game that you're playing characters that are adolescent, or teens or preteens. This section is
it's invaluable.
It's full of great advice and great examples that could be used beyond Unmasked. The teen problem section, the school problem section is freaking awesome.
And like I said, it gives you it actually, for me, it gave me a really good blueprint or flow chart for pacing.
Yep. And it has a whole section on social issues, which could be used outside of the unmasked setting as well. It talks about the playing characters that don't have super abilities and how normal people interact with teens with superpowers, which is always good. It's basically advice on running a teen super game, which is all great advice, to be honest.
Right.
And then GM advice.
And that's, I think chapter 17 really digs into the GM advice. It gave you options, like, for example, once per session bonus power shifts that characters could use, just during that particular session. So every session, every player knew that they had a bonus power shift that will come into play. And it gave you advice on how or where that power shift could be applied, and, basically once used, it's done. It's a one and done. So, you could have had that be like a power shift, okay, he gets one power shift, he gets to dig deep. And, this is the one where I want to punch the enemy with a super powered punch. So I'm gonna use that power shift on my might attack or something like that. So cool stuff like that.
This is also the section where I think the concept of power stunts first began.
Yep.
Because he has a whole section in here about uncovering new powers or enhancing your current powers. And they very, it's the idea of spending XP to do additional abilities. It's the early concept of power stunts.
Early concept of power stunts. It was also one of the first books that talked about sacrificing your ciphers. Well, in this one, of course, mementos. You could actually sacrifice a memento, like if you were down on the damage track or stuff like that. You could literally sacrifice a level 3 memento or any number adding up to 3 levels to move up damage track, stuff like that. It was, it gave examples of making your game more gritty. It was.
Speaking of mementos, the chapter 18 was all about mementos.
Right. Yeah. When we get to chapter 18, which is the next chapter, it talks about, all the aspects of what you could do with a memento, where they're found.
All right, so let's break down mementos. Basically, a memento is the unmasked version of ciphers.
Right.
And there were mundane items that were had a one-time ability, similar to the mask with the Prodigy mask were created from mundane items to create this mask. Mementos had the same concept, but just it was their way of explaining ciphers in the setting.
Correct. And you could, and it was kind of cool too, because it kind of gave you the ability to tie that to the 80s in of itself. So, I don't know if you guys, how many people out there, but in the 80s, the girls used to wear these neon rubber bracelets. Remember those bracelets, Anthony? So you could literally have said that, one of these bracelets was a, it was a super stretchy, one where you could, slide down the side of a wall with it, or, you could launch it as a single attack. It was just kind of gave you ideas in how to make these mementos manifest, which was really cool.
Also, I love the fact that they got rid of the entire concept in this setting of how do I know what this cipher does? They just said you touch it, you know what it does.
Right.
Like the connection between your Prodigy mask and the memento have like some sort of like an unconscious knowledge of you touch a memento, you touch a cipher, you immediately know what it does. I like that. It got rid of, it explained the way, do I have to roll to see what the memento does, what the cipher does?
Right. And like I said, here's just one example of one of the ciphers was like a fruit roll-up, because that's where fruit roll-ups came out. If the fruit roll-up is eaten, the user overcome with a momentary feeling of having food poison and gains the ability to burn any memento they're holding to restore a number of points equal to that memento's level to any of their pools. So stuff like that. It was just interesting stuff. And he had there's a pretty big list of mementos.
Yeah, and I will say this: the cipher list, where they lacked in abilities, this book more than made up for with the cipher list, because all the ciphers in here were some of my favorite. Like, matter of fact, when I read Unmasked, is what made me want to create my own ciphers, because they were so freaking cool.
Yep.
And I love it's like what you said. I love what they were, like guitar pick, a hall pass, like just the common random object. Like it made you be like, hey, I don't have to come up with like this, like super scientific name to have a cool cipher. I could call it whatever the hell I want and attach abilities to it that make sense.
And, here's another thing too, where we were a little frustrated with the number of foci that were put in the book. Then they kind of make up for it on the back end by giving you examples of masks that you could just give players.
Yeah.
So there's like what? That's 3, 6. So there's like 6 more. There's 6 masks that you can give, and they actually tell you about the mask form.
Dean, you got to state that you go into the next chapter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Yeah, the next chapter is 19. I apologize, everybody. This is
You
where they
just
kind of
start
make.
talking, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, what? Where is it at?
I'm sorry. That's chapter 19. But they do. They give you six more. They give you literally six masks, and they tell you what the mask looks like. They tell you what the mask form is. They tell you if you're gonna run the person as a NPC, what level they are. But you could actually give these masks to people and have them, play these characters like that as well. So that's another cool aspect.
Yeah, the cool thing too that I really liked about the mask form is that I came up with character ideas just from reading these NPC ideas, just the mask and what I read. I love stuff like this because I can use this in the setting or out the setting. You can make a superhero villain team just by taking the ideas and the abilities from these masks in a non-unmasked game.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny too. It was, it just, like I said, it was just easy. It made a lot of stuff easy, even though, certain things were lacking. It made a lot of stuff very easy to do,
And I'm going to say this, chapter 20 is one of my favorite chapters on this book. It's the quick adventure generator. I've used this a ton of times. I love when MCG does any of these like improv generators. So for the sake of shits and giggles, let's do a quick adventure, superhero adventure.
3D10, I got 3D10 right here.
All right. So the first thing you do, just so you guys see how cool this is. All right.
So you roll 3D10 and 3D10, I got.
All right, just hold on. Before you start rolling, D, it's basically a character sentence for an adventure is who, why, and what the special instance is. So roll a D10 for who.
9.
So 9 is a college kid. Why?
4.
A college kid follows what?
2.
A college kid follows a mass and roll the special.
Let's see. Special is a 10.
A college kid follows a mask. So I'm assuming a mask is one of the memento masks, a prodigy mask. And you said 10, which leads into a hostage situation. So then you have to take that. So if they high school players, you can have one of the characters have a crush on a college intern who's like Miss Hathaway, who's the college intern, social studies teacher. One of the characters has a crush on her. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's following everything she does. She discovers a mask, and because the mask has the super bag takes her hostage.
There you go.
And you have a immediate adventure. I'm a sucker for I'm always a sucker for the improv charts.
And then we go into the next section, which is chapter 21, Mr. Monster, which is a short adventure.
Yep.
Which is, once again, these little mini adventures, I think this is where they started coming up with the idea for Cypher shorts. Because, they're a little bit more fleshed out.
This isn't a Cypher short, dude. This is a full fleshed out.
Actually, it is more fleshed out. I thought it was shorter than this, but
No, this is
fully fleshed out. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a multi-session adventure. You probably get 12 hours out of this.
Absolutely.
And
of course, we move into the last section, which is back matter, and that's just all the stuff. That's, it gives you a list of the play testers and contributors, character sheets, and an index. And like we said before, if you haven't seen this, you should take a look at the character sheet for this. This character sheet is actually pretty damn cool. Because it has a nice little smaller section for your team form, and that's really where you get your name and your descriptor. Of course, like you said, you get 666 in all of your pools with 2 points to add to any pool, or break up however you see fit. And then right next to it, it has your mask form, which, and all the things that you need for that. But it even reminds you of like Anthony was saying, with all the triangles and the neon colors and stuff. It's very 80s all day long.
I mean, Bear, I've always said this every time we talk about Unmasked, but Bear really, I mean, next to Invisible Sun, I think this is the best layout on any of the MCG books I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's great. I mean,
the layout is so clean. Yeah,
it evokes the era, is what it does. That's literally all I can say. It's very evocative of the era in of itself. So
yeah, this like a couple people in chat are saying the same thing about the layout. This layout, like the only Invisible Sun is probably the next one that I think has. I mean, I like the layout on 99% of the books, but this one just really stands out.
Oh yeah, well, trust me. Kazarek said the new Monero looks great, but it makes printers cry. This one would make a printer cry too, because all the color. Oh my God, the color in this is crazy, and the level and the tonal quality of it. When you look at this book, like I said, if you just look on page, Al, can you pull up page 189 on the PDF? If you put that up there, that picture will just show you the idea of the contrast, where you literally look like, you're going from the untouched bright portion of the city into this, singed, smoky, it's just really one of those books that has so much going on in the artwork and in the layout. You can't say a bad thing about it.
Yeah, this character sheet is crisp, bro. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh yeah, that character sheet is bomb diggity.
This character sheet is clean. As someone that's, we're actually looking into making character sheets. This is top notch to me.
Right. That's what you want. This is what you want in a character sheet. Because, and the other thing I like about it, it's enough room. Even though it's a lot on the sheet, there's enough room. When you make a character.
I think that's what it is too. There's a lot. It has plenty of room that some of the other sheets doesn't provide you.
Right. So, guys.
So what's your overall thought on this?
Overall thought on Unmasked, like we said, revisiting it, Unmasked really moves up the list. If we were to do a rating, do our ratings once again, Unmasked would definitely move up on the list because it has now become a very essential piece if you want to develop a superhero game. Because even if you weren't going to do the setting in of itself, just the tool pieces in there, like we were talking about for pacing, we were talking about for developing schools and school systems and all the NPCs in there. The fact that Boundary Bay is laid out, you got a whole small town laid out in Long Island. That's crazy. I mean, the amount of stuff that's there. So yeah, as far as I'm gonna say, yeah, it's how many what's our start? How many ciphers are we gonna give this one?
All right, I'll just give my. I think when this book first came out, right, I think it's a lot better than like what Dean said. I think Claim the Sky and the revised Cypher book made this book a lot more feasible for someone wanting to run supers,
right,
using Cypher system. So I think that it aged way better with time, and if you just got into Cypher system and you purchased Claim the Sky, it's definitely worth it to go back and revisit Unmasked, because there's some really cool concepts, and the superhero genre, the setting of supers in Unmasked is unlike any other super setting that's out there. So it's very original. But I will say this, just having Unmasked without Claim the Sky doesn't do Unmasked justice. I think you kind of need both books.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, and if you really want to do it, you might as well get the trifecta. You might as well go ahead, have Unmasked, Origin, and First Responders right next to each other, because it's just they all just work so well together.
Just, I mean, from like, if we give it like an advice, right?
Yes.
I think Claim the Sky and Origins could be run, like the settings, right? Could be run with just the CSR, and you get a complete supers experience, right?
Absolutely.
I think Unmasked, you can run Unmasked with just the CSR, but you're not going to get the full supers experience.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said it's the trifecta. If I were to run Claim the Sky, I'd want to run something along the lines of taking Claim the Sky. I mean, not Claim the Sky, but taking the Origin and Unmasked and kind of marrying them. You know, it would be, to me, I think it would be a crazy idea to mix those two lores into
No, I mean, the reason why I said it is just from a GM perspective. Unmasked just doesn't give you the tools.
Right. Oh, no, agreed. Agreed.
Like it doesn't give you the abilities. It doesn't give you the creatures or baddies provided in the book itself.
Correct. You know what I mean? No, absolutely.
It has like nothing to do with the concept of what's like the story or setting. I'm just the tools it provides a first-time GM.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're running the adventure that's written in the book.
Like I said, and I don't think I would try to put this on a first-time GM to necessarily have to do, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
But I will say this, and I know you probably disagree with me. Out of all the superhero settings that MCG has provided, and that's Claim the Sky, the Origin, and this is the best one. The setting is the best one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't agree, but it's up there. You know, I think I like the Origin more, only because the Origin. Well, we'll talk about that when we do the Origin. When we do the Origin walkthrough, I won't even get into it. But this is great, absolutely. And you know, it does not fall low anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I'm only putting the Origin a couple of points above it, in my opinion.
So overall thoughts, I think me and Dean could both agree. Great book. Just wish it had more powers and abilities and more actual creatures, so you could tell stories outside of the stories that they provide you within the book. But you can accomplish that with the revised Cypher System book and with Claim the Sky. Once you add those two other books into the mix, then the possibilities are endless for Unmasked. So it's definitely worth picking up. You could agree with that, right, Dean?
Absolutely. Like we said, this one is Unmasked is Monte Cook's fine wine. It is aged well. Yep. You know.
Oh, it's Dennis Detwiller's fine wine.
Well, MCG published it. Dennis Detwiller wrote it.
Monte Cook Games.
Yeah. Like I said, MCG published it, but Dennis Detwiller definitely wrote it. It is a fine wine. This is, and and I think also that people should realize, you know, go in with an open mind. If you go in with an open mind, you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
And so if you like us and you like what we do, please join the Cypher Unlimited Discord server. It's the largest fan-run Discord server for all things Monte Cook Games, and we have games being run at all times and all hours of the night. If you're not a fan of Discord, join our Facebook group. Not as big as our Discord, but plenty of great discussions being had there as well. please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really trying to get to 1,000 subs there. We'll greatly appreciate it. If you liked our videos and find it in your heart to subscribe, or give us a follow here on Twitch, or subscribe here if you can as well. We'll really appreciate it. Our videos are always free, but those subscriptions helps us out with little things like Zoom course if we do get to monetize. Give us a donation on Ko-fi. Like I said about free videos, it just helps us out. Or go to our online store and pick up some cool Cypher Unlimited merch like me and Dean got on. You'll be the coolest kid on the block wearing some CU gear. Did I miss anything? I don't think I did.
No, you didn't. So,
Yeah, and last but not least, we love you guys. Dean, you got any final words?
Only words I got, is what we always tell everybody. You know what? Thank you again, everybody. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.